So,
This again.
yeah, just a quick recap here. Detailed knowledge means that you don't make any mistakes on the facts. Perceptive insight means you have an interesting thesis. Okay? Interesting thesis should be debatable. Okay? Those are the keys that you want to take away from this. All right? So I am doing two things while I'm scoring this. I am immediately looking at your thesis right off the bat. Okay? And your thesis is the only thing I'm going to have you label this time. I can find the rest of the stuff. So I will look at your thesis, and if it is interesting, great. If not, that's a problem. Okay? All right, so that's B. Okay, you get 5 to 6 points out of that. Next, we go into appreciation of writer's choices. This is technique, structure, form. So take a look down here. Again, very vague rubric. That's why I'm doing this explanation. Okay? There's excellent appreciation. There's adequate appreciation. There is some mention, but little appreciation. Okay? So what does that mean? What is excellent appreciation of the ways in which language, structure, technique, and style shape meaning? This basically breaks down to your literary techniques. Okay? Language, structure, technique. So technique is complex literary techniques. And whenever this is where a lot of you are going to have problems. Because a lot of you just dropped in literary techniques randomly. You're like, oh, and the helmet was a symbol of the wartime past of Utajima. And you just moved on. And you didn't connect that to your overall theme. Because you were like, I just got to get 5 literary techniques in. And that's fine. You did your job for the last essay. That won't do it for this one. Okay? This one requires that you not only bring the techniques in, but show how they shape meaning. Meaning, how do they support your thesis? Okay? Now, language, if you want to know, well, what does that mean, language? So you should be talking about the specific choices that the author is making in terms of words and things like that. Okay? So typically when you have a quote, you're going to then have a literary technique that goes into the analysis of the quote, and you should probably say something about specifics in the quote as well, every now and then. So for excellent to happen means that you do this with every literary technique. Okay? I said at least 5. You could have more. You could actually have less on this one. I'm not going to component score you on this. So if you have 4 literary techniques that you do a really good job of explaining, I'm okay with that. Okay? What I care about is that you have explained them. You could conversely have 10 literary techniques that you don't connect to meaning, and you're going to get a bad score on this because you're just mentioning them. Okay? Just mentioning them doesn't do it. If you were to relate this to TOK, and I say walk dropping, right? Where people are just putting their way of knowing in there without connecting it to anything. That's kind of what this is. Just dropping a literary technique without connecting it to anything. All right? Now, language, structure, and technique. Some of you, and then style. So some of you may say, well, what about structure? Structure is sort of dependent on if you were to talk about the structure of the work. For example, metamorphosis being broken up into 3 major sections. Okay, that would be an analysis of structure. Remember, there's Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3. All right. Medea would be an analysis of the presentation of the dialogue. All right, the play itself, no acts, right? One beginning to end. That would be showing some awareness of structure. You don't have to do all of that, okay? Your essay could focus on something that doesn't have to do with structure, okay? But if it does talk about structure, then you're going to want to show awareness of it, okay? And then style is tricky, okay? Style is a higher level thing. If you can kind of understand that Mishima has a very poetic, elaborate, detailed imagery-based style, then you kind of get that aspect of it. If you talk about Kafka's style of absurdity and darkness and things like that, that's style. And then if you talk about Euripides' style, it probably has something to do with a constant flow from beginning to end and sort of major blocks of dialogue to represent characters' inner feelings, okay? So that's not a huge deal. If you could do that, you're probably already at a top-level paper. So it's not required. You could be at the top level without doing that, but it's kind of icing on the cake. Okay? Question?
Oh yeah. You just answered.
So that's C. Okay? Any questions on this? So basically, if you do it with every literary technique, you're going to get a 5 or a 6. If you do it with, let's say, half of your literary techniques, then you're going to be into the 3 to 4 range. And then if you don't really do it at all, you're down here to a 1 or a 2. Okay? Oh, how do you determine a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6? You know, it's a feeling of the overall essay. All right? I get a feeling pretty quickly at the beginning if you put time into this or not. Okay? Now, you should not have written these the night before because they've been written already. That was the whole idea here. The problem is that you may just leave what you did before. If you do that, you will probably get a bad score. You need to get in and make modifications to this. Okay? So, by the way, the essay's not due Thursday anymore. Okay? I'm going to give you until after break. Okay? All right? So that's just a little, I don't know, something I do. I didn't expect that response because the thing that I do is actually kind of mean. I pretend that the due date is earlier to kind of stress you out. And then I always, I've done it all year. I don't know if you've noticed. Like every time I assign something, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll give you an extension. And I was always planning on having it due at that time. So I don't know why I got applause for that.
I think he's just saying that to say that.
Way to trick us. Hey, you got me, man. Touche. All right. All right, now we got 2 more. Hang in there with me, okay? We got 2 more. Organization and development. Obviously, you got to hit word count. If you miss word count over or under, it's an automatic 2-point deduction. Okay? Jesus. Man, these guys really care about word count. All right. So, take a look at the bottom. You always, on a rubric, in case you haven't figured out how to read rubrics yet, you always look at the highest band, the highest score mark. Ideas are persuasively organized and developed with effectively integrated examples. So, keywords there, persuasively organized. What does that mean? Because if you do that, you get a 5. If it's not persuasive, you get a 4. If it's adequate, you get a 3. So, what does it mean by persuasive? It means that you have actually changed my mind or caused me to think about something in the way that you are presenting it. Okay? That's what persuasive means. I like to use the example of trying to convince your parents to get you a car. If you're persuasive, you get a car. If you're not, you don't. Okay? So how can you be persuasive? Well, you probably have an instinct for what matters most to your parent. Okay? You know, you see them, you see what they stress about. So you know the button to push that's going to get them to really think about it. Because you've got a lot of other reasons, probably. Oh, I could help pick up groceries and stuff like that. Things that you can use. But there's that one thing. And it's usually, especially in families of multiple children, it's usually I will pick up the other child from school or from practice, and you won't have to do that anymore. Okay? That's really what parents want, right? They don't have time, and it's difficult. I'm still amazed at how many it amazes me that all kids, elementary, middle, and high school, all you have cars already, but freshmen and sophomore, get out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and there's somebody there to pick them up. I mean, not all the time. Sometimes you go to after-school care, like I did. But a lot of times, there's somebody there to pick them up. It's like grandmother or somebody doesn't work. It's just amazing to me because I've always worked all day long, and I can't imagine having the time to do that. But you make it work. So that's persuasive. Okay. Now, persuasively organized and developed. So let's take a look at this sort of graphic depiction of what your essay would look like. Okay? Now, there's a basic formula for this. It goes along with any essay or any project or any presentation that you're going to do. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. It's as simple as that.
Wow, that's so deep and playful.
It's very, very, it's elegant in its simplicity, okay? In that, and then just notice or think back to any presentation or anything you've ever sort of experienced, even movies, you know, even the Avengers movie that's coming out. The beginning of the movie will set things up, tell you who's in it, show you kind of the basic things that might happen, hint at possible conflicts. Then the action starts and the movie happens. Then you get to a climax, it's over, and they wrap up the pieces at the end. Okay? And that's pretty much the formula. Okay? That's the same thing with your essay. And this aligns to an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Okay? So that's kind of oversimplified. Now, how do you make this persuasive? Okay? Persuasive means that it is consistent throughout. That it is an entire essay. Okay? It feels like one body of work. You've seen movies where you are disappointed because it feels like something was missing or one part of the story wasn't told or something like that. That's like an essay that's missing focus at a certain point. Okay? It's not difficult to do all these things that I'm telling you about in a paragraph. It's hard to do it in every single paragraph. Now, what you want to do is, in order to get this whole thing to work together, you're obviously going to start with your thesis. And that thesis is the anchor for the entire essay. Okay, so every piece of that essay goes back to that thesis. It's kind of like your EEs that are being graded, or not yet graded by me, but some people are grading them. The basic way I grade an EE is every section should answer the research question. If it doesn't, something's wrong. Okay? Same thing with this. Every section connects back to the thesis. Okay? Then, the beginning really previews and sets up everything that you're about to talk about. Okay? So that's why the preview is going into each section. And then, each section kind of flows together and has a overall feel to it. The only way to do this is to write an essay, go back, look at it again, modify it, move stuff around, and make sure it's all consistent. Because invariably, it's not hard to tell when an essay is written the night before. It's really not. Because what happens is when you write an essay, you start thinking about things. You change your ideas. You come across a quote. You say, oh, wait a second, I didn't think about that. The essay will change its focus from beginning to end. It'll be talking about one thing at the beginning, and it'll be talking about something else at the end. And they lost focus. That is, I would say 50% of the times that I mark papers down, it's because of that. Okay? And that always happens when you write the night before. Because you're tired, and you're just banging something out in a period of 2 to 3 hours, and when it's done, it's done. You don't have time to go back and look it over. Okay? So, my goal with having you done drafts already is that you can now go back and look at this carefully. Okay? So, the other sort of trick that I use, it's what's called 2-3-1. Okay? And this is something that I developed when I was like teaching the old FCAT rights to like 9th and 10th graders, and we were just trying to get people to pass. This is a strategy for organizing your ideas. Okay? Now what this means is you are going in and you're saying, here are my main points of support. Which one is the best? Okay? A well thought out argument is going to do this. If you really want a car, then you're going to think about it and say, all right, what is it that she cares about the most? And that's your strongest point. And what are you going to do usually with that? You're going to set up your other points, and then you're going to bang it home at the end with your strongest point. Same idea here. So 1 would represent your strongest point, your first place point. Okay? And then 2 is your middle, and 3 is your weakest. So the idea with 2, 3, 1 is that you finish with your strongest point, but you also don't start out with your weakest point. You protect your weakest point in the middle. You wouldn't start out your argument to your parents with this incredibly weak point, okay? Something like, it will teach me responsibility and learning the rules of the road, right? Because what have you done? You've lost your parent at that point. Their eyes roll back into their head, and they're not listening to the rest of what you said because they think that you're an idiot, okay? So you start with something relatively strong, and they're like, okay, now I'm listening. And then you give them your weak one because you've already got them. And then you bring it home with your strongest point. So this, it might sound silly, but this does something. This requires you to go in and analyze your support and say to yourself, do I think this is good or not? So it's a weird little trick, and it might seem kind of hokey to go in and rank your points. But it actually serves a good purpose because it causes you to self-evaluate and say, do I like this or not? Because a lot of times you're going to go in and you're going to say, wow, this isn't even a 3. This is a crap paragraph, and I need to rewrite this. Okay? If you get something that should be a 6 or a 7, rewrite. Okay? Don't use it. So it'll cause you to do that. It'll cause you to reassess. And then you can go in and you can shift your paragraphs around and say, you know what, I think this should come first, this should come last. It causes it to be more of an active process. And it causes the essay to come together as a whole, as opposed to being made up of separate parts. Okay? All right, so I can tell I'm starting to bore you and lose you. So let's move on to the last one. Okay? All right, language. This is the easiest one, in a sense, okay? But it's difficult for you living in the age of text messaging and Grammarly. Language is very clear, effective, carefully chosen, and precise with a high degree of accuracy in grammar, vocabulary, and sentence construction. What this means to me is that you probably shouldn't have one grammatical error. I'll probably let you get away with one if you've got some nice, pretty vocabulary in there, okay? But if not, if I don't see pretty vocabulary, then if I see a grammar error, I can't give you a 5. Why should I? Why should I give you the top score if you didn't take the time to fix your grammar? Okay? So, accuracy in grammar, vocabulary, and sentence construction. Okay? Did you have an incomplete sentence? A lot of you guys do run-on sentences where you'll go on for 3 or 4 lines with one sentence. That is not an accurate sentence construction. Okay? A sentence should have a clear structure to it and not go on, and you should never have an incomplete sentence. Okay? Where you sort of, start typing something and then you get a text and you forget that you didn't finish it and there's the end of a sentence. So anything like that, and I drop you down. Okay, so look at the difference. High degree of accuracy, good degree of accuracy, despite some lapses. Okay, So 5 is perfect, no errors. 4 is maybe 1 or 2 errors. 3, you've got 4 or 5 errors. Errors and consistencies are apparent. Okay? So that's really the key on that last criteria. All right? Which is why I want you to have somebody else look at your essay here in order to make sure. Because it's, and I always say this, and hopefully it gets through to you, you will not see your own errors. Okay? You won't. It's something with the brain. It happens to me too. Your brain doesn't see the mistakes that you make. It makes the same mistake again when it looks at it. It thinks that's fine. Okay? So you need a different brain to come in and notice stuff that doesn't look right. Okay? All right, so that comprises your 25 points. All right, that is what you're going to be scored on. Some of the other specific details, did I already post to Edmodo?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I'll post to Edmodo now. You now know that you have more time. The due date for you guys is going to actually be April 3rd.
Is that?
Okay? It is the Wednesday after spring break. Okay, so I'm giving you the break to work on this. I am going to give you the rest of class to talk and relax because you've listened for a while now and you're probably all English lit out. I would like you to maybe talk to somebody and see if, hey, can I send you my essay? Can you send me yours? Just be careful that you don't accidentally upload their essay to turnitin.com. Listen, this is now an official IB assessment. Okay? So just a word about plagiarism. On previous ones, those are drafts. This is it. This is the official. So any plagiarism on this is automatic academic probation. Okay? So that means one sentence that comes up as you pulled it from somewhere else. So don't play with that. You're going to put it on Turnitin in a revision assignment.